Hey, comic lovers, welcome back to the show. EMoney and the Old Man back out here with you in the garage, and we got Thor, the Dog of Thunder, between us. He finally outgrew our laps, and not to mention his suit.
So now he gets a throne?
He gets a chair. He gets a nice, comfy chair.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. All right, so comic lovers, today we are talking about some of our favorite comic book artists. And I don't know about you, but I have a few in mind already.
I can always name artists. I mean, keep in mind, I appreciate good writing as long as the art is adequate. But good art, definitely like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet, but I'm pretty sure we're going to have maybe some Alex Ross in the mix, some Jim Lee, and I know you're going to have your buddy Rob Liefeld in the mix too. So, yeah.
Fight him.
All right, comic lovers, get fitted for your boots and your tights. This is Back Issues. All right, comic lovers, so before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, turn on notifications, and leave us a comment. I mean, we like when people say hi.
Really?
Yes.
How do you know?
I'm pretty sure I'd like it.
Okay.
All right, so top 5 favorite comic book artists. So what do you say we get into this?
Well, who goes first? You cheat.
No.
You cheat.
He's predictable. All right, so my number 5 pick. This is a guy from my childhood. This is artist John Byrne, who some of you may remember I mentioned him in our comic industry of the 90s episode. He was the first artist to make a variant cover in 1986, which was Man of Steel issue number 1. And this is probably the image of Superman I have in my head the most, as this was pretty much the artist of my childhood for Superman. And you can see in this issue, I mean, he was so smooth. I mean, the dimensions were so on point. I mean, it was amazing. You see in this final panel here, it's like, I'll pop it up in a second here. And I mean, if you want an iconic image of Superman, I mean, this
that's it.
Like, that's it right there. I mean, new artists like in New 52 and DC Rebirth, they do a different costume for Superman, which that's fine. Modernize it a little bit, I guess. But as far as the classic iconic image, like that's what I see when I think of Superman, John Byrne's.
He made him look like Christopher Reeves.
Oh yeah, exactly. And a lot of the cartoons that I watched seemed to be taken from John Byrne's when I was a kid. And his other notable work, he worked in X-Men and Fantastic Four, a lot of work for Marvel, and he's also the co-creator of Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost, Sabretooth, a lot of X-Men characters among others. And he was influenced by another great artist who is surprisingly my number 4 pick. So he admired him for his naturalistic style.
No
was
spoilers.
Influenced by him. So yeah, kind of I guess I have a style that I like.
Nothing wrong with that.
No. And he was inducted into the Will Eisner Artist Hall of Fame in 2015. And well deserved. And also he was responsible for work for X-Men Days of Future Past and the X-Men Dark Phoenix saga. So a lot of work for Marvel, but ironically I knew him best for his Superman work. So my number 5 pick, John Byrne.
He had a nice run on Fantastic Four too. All right, so when I first started collecting comics back in the Dark Ages, I couldn't have named but like maybe a couple of artists, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko. That's about it. I mean, I really didn't care. Then as a young adult, I ran into a guy at one of the local comic book shops named Sean Hamilton. And over the next few years, Sean and I became friends. We bought, sold, traded, talked about comics with each other, and it was a kindred spirit that taught me a lot about art. And by the way, Sean, if you get this message, we lost contact with each other. Let's get together and shoot the breeze, tie up some loose ends, see what's going on with each other. And if you know Sean, tell him that I'm looking for him. At any rate, so one of the artists that Sean introduced me to was a guy named Wally Wood. Now, Wally started out in the late 40s. He got through friends and friends of friends, he finally got an interview, because he got turned down a lot. Finally got an interview with Will Eisner, the guy who drew The Spirit. And he was hired on the spot to do backgrounds, so that's where he started. Then he went to EC Comics, the people that are famous for the horror books. Mm-hmm. And he talked them into doing the weird science comic and the weird fantasy comic, their first step into science fiction books. And finally those two merged together and became Weird Science Fantasy. He also worked on a publication called Galaxy Science Fiction, which is one of those little books that comes out every month, and it's not a comic book, but science fiction writers of the time would put stories in there, and he illustrated for some of the best. He drew for Isaac Asimov, Philip K. Dick, Frederick Pohl, Robert Silverberg, so he rubbed noses with the science fiction elite. Then he worked for Marvel, and he did a little 4-issue run on Daredevil, numbers 5 through 8. When you see Daredevil in a red costume, you can thank Wally for that, because that was his deal. Then in issue number 8, he and Stan created a villain called Stilt Man. And you and I talked about Stilt Man. I mean, you can get real tall. I mean, you don't even really grow real big. Your legs just pop out. I don't know how they made that interesting, but another thing that Sean introduced me to was a little short run called Tower of Shadows for Marvel that Wally worked on. It only went for 9 issues, then they changed the format and called it Creatures on the Loose. But in those 9 issues, you had stories by Jim Steranko, Neil Adams, Don Heck, John Romita Sr., Gene Colan, Steve Ditko, Maurice Severin, and Bernie Wrightson. It is a art-filled horror anthology. If you've not seen it, hopefully there's a trade out there, because I would love to get my hands on it. Wally's life wasn't easy peasy. He did not have smooth sailing. He had 3 marriages, and after a while he started getting these terrible unexplained headaches, which sent him to drinking. He became an alcoholic. He had kidney failure, and finally he had a stroke that made him lose vision in his one eye. So due to his declining health and the lack of career prospects, Wally took his own life in 1981. Gary Kurtzman, who was the editor of EC Comics when Wally was there, has said, and I quote, "Wally had a tension in him, an intensity that he locked away in an internal steam boiler. I think it ate away his insides, and the work really used him up. I think he delivered some of the finest work that was ever drawn, and I think it's to his credit that he put so much intensity into his work at great sacrifice to himself." So that's my number 5 pick.
All right. So heading into my number 4, and this is a guy who I actually got to meet a few years ago. Neil Adams, who I actually met at my job when I was working at WHAS here in Louisville at the time. And I actually got to write his interview. The producer knew I was a big comic book guy, and she came to me and said, "Do you know who Neil Adams is?" Like, yeah, I know him, or know of him.
They had no idea what to ask this man.
No. And I said, "Well, can you come up with things to talk about?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can come up with stuff to ask him." And I did my research, and we talked about Neil Adams was...
His research was he came and asked me.
I did more than just ask him.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Mostly asked me.
Don't take credit for my stuff. All right. So some of the stuff we talked about was his work with fighting drugs. He did Green Arrow, Green Lantern when Speedy becomes a drug junkie. And they tackled that issue. And also he did work for we wanted to find a Louisville connection when we did the interview. So, of course, we came up with the Superman versus Muhammad Ali issue.
Because those of y'all don't know, we're from Louisville, Kentucky, and Muhammad Ali also hails from Louisville.
Yeah.
So,
So when I was doing like research, like kind of like during a taping of Great Day Live, not the one he was in, but another one after my producer asked me to help out. So I got excited when I remembered it, and I run up to my producer during a commercial break, and I'm like, Holly. It's like, you want a Louisville connection with Neil Adams? She's like, yeah, that'd be great. And I show her the picture of Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and she's like, oh my God, that's perfect.
It is.
Yeah, and if you ever see the issue, he writes a lot of characters into the crowd of Superman versus Muhammad Ali, which was really funny. And not just that, but he also did a lot of other great stuff. He's been inducted into every Artist Hall of Fame, including Will Eisner, which is well deserved. And also, he was part of the first intercompany crossover event.
I know you love those.
Yes, I love crossovers, and he was part of the first Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, and he was part of that team, which was a great feather in your cap, I think, for an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. Oh, I forgot to show this. This is what he autographed for us. The Batman issue where we see the return of Joker, and Batman sales were in decline at this time. It had gotten silly, and it had been influenced by Adam West Batman TV show, and that's fine for some people, but it had become campy in the comic books as well. And Neil Adams is a big part of what brought Batman back to his dark origins, which it.
And Frank Miller too.
Yes, Frank Miller too, I guess. But yeah, and it kind of started here with Neil Adams' work in the Return of Joker story. So lot of great contributions to the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I forgot to mention also Neil Adams when the Superman movie came out, Christopher Reeve. Neil Adams was part of a group of people who made sure that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster got credit for their creation of Superman, because they had been kind of snubbed by the companies for decades, really.
Neil was definitely one of those guys who pushed for creators' rights.
Yes, absolutely. And he made sure that Jerry and Joe were credited for their creation of Superman at the beginning of the film, and made sure that they received some sort of compensation for their work, which was a really big deal at the time. So, great artist, but by all accounts, pretty great guy too.
Seems to be.
Yeah. So, Neil Adams, my number 4. Oops.
All right, so my number 4. I'm ashamed to say when I went digging through the collection for artwork, I don't have any.
Ah.
Yeah, that's sad. But my number 4 is Barry Smith. He's the only British guy on my list. Now, he changed his name later to Barry Windsor-Smith. I'll get back to that in a minute. One of the earliest things I could see him do for Marvel was the cover of X-Men 53. I think he did the interiors too. It's the one with Blastar on the cover, and the X-Men are wearing their new uniforms. But he really got my attention in Conan the Barbarian for Marvel. He did 21 of the first 24 issues. Beautiful stuff. Absolutely gorgeous stuff. Such detail. And I remember the story that if you look real close at one of the panels, Conan's in a treasure vault. And hidden amongst the drawings of the coins, Barry put something along the lines of, "I can't believe I'm drawing all these coins." He just kind of hid that. That was cool. But those 24 issues, he missed 3, and evidently he wasn't real happy about the way the comic book business worked. I don't know the details of that, but he became disillusioned. He still went on to do Marvel Comics Presents the Weapon X storylines, number 72 through 84. I think he wrote and penciled that. Then when Jim Shooter moved to Valiant Comics, he was so impressed with Barry that he hired him to be his lead artist. He did Eternal Warrior. He did he did a whole run on Archer and Armstrong. I think that was the thing he spent most of his time working on. Then when Shooter left, Smith quit. Barry Smith quit because he wasn't happy, and I've got a quote here from a comment he made on work for hire contracts, which is basically what all comic book creators were at the time. And he said, a work for hire contract is a legal but unethical instrument designed to rape and plunder young talents of every possible prerogative they would otherwise possess if they had the fortune to work for more scrupulous, morally invested publishers. So, as you can see, he didn't have a lot of good stuff to say about the comic book industry. In fact, in an interview, he was asked if he would ever return to Archer and Armstrong. And he said, "When pigs fly to the moon and return home safely." Now, the bit about his name changes to Barry Windsor-Smith. I always assumed that he married a woman whose last name was Windsor, and he took the hyphenated name, which a lot of people do. Turns out Windsor is his mother's surname.
Oh.
So he took his mom's name in tribute to her. And that's my number 4. It's up
Number
to you.
4. All right, so number 3, and not surprisingly, I have another Superman artist here. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, they might think I'm, you know, biased towards Superman on these shows.
You are.
Okay, but there's a reason for that. When I was a kid and, you know, Dad was bringing home issues for me every Wednesday, most of them were Batman and Superman. I mean, I did not get into Marvel until much later in life. And
I brought home what he said he wanted.
Okay, fine. I knew Batman and Superman. I didn't know my Marvel heroes that well, so, you know, that's what I read. That's what I wanted. So if you're wondering why I'm always talking Batman and Superman, that's why, because that's what I read as a kid. So my number 3 pick is an artist by the name of Dan Jurgens, and his style is very similar to John Byrne, I'd say, and
They resemble each other.
And there's a lot of overlap in their careers. And Dan Jurgens, he did the Superman versus Doomsday, Death of Superman, and it's just a beautiful issue. I mean, it's so smooth. And he also created Doomsday, and he created Hank Henshaw, who would become Cyborg Superman, and also created Booster Gold. So a lot of contributions to DC in that time.
I won't hold Booster Gold against him. That's okay.
Not a fan of Booster Gold.
No.
But he did a lot of great stories, and he did all of Superman's encounters with Doomsday was drawn by Dan Jurgens. And, you know, the Death of Superman, then later on the Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey miniseries, and then the Doomsday Wars, which involves Superman and the rest of the Justice League, also by Dan Jurgens. So I love the way he drew Doomsday, and I've never been happy with any other drawings of Doomsday by other artists. You know, he pops up, I see him, and he's always too big. I think that was one of my big issues. You know, they drew Doomsday too big compared to Superman and the other characters. And anytime I see another artist draw, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll live with it, but I don't like it that much. And also, Dan Jurgens was a part of the monumental event Marvel vs. DC miniseries.
You like your crossovers.
I do love crossovers. So if you read that, pick it up. I highly recommend it. You know, all of the greatest characters at the time, you know, battling it out. You know, when else are you going to see, you know, Superman versus the Incredible Hulk, or you know, Wonder Woman versus Storm? I mean,
you're not.
Yeah, you're not. So if you want to see that, you know, read Marvel vs. DC and the follow-up series, All Access and Unlimited Access, all great stuff. But Dan Jurgens, a lot of contributions to comic book in the 90s, especially for Superman. So my number 3 pick.
All right, so back to me, I guess. My number 3 pick. It's a guy a lot of y'all haven't heard of. You probably recognize his work, but he wasn't just a comic book artist. He did a lot of other stuff, which I'll get into. But back when he first started, Frank Frazetta went where he could find work, which is the way a lot of comic people will start. I mean, if you can't if you can't get hired on with a comic book company, you draw postcards. Whatever you can do to feed yourself. So he did a lot of oddball stuff. But finally, he landed a job drawing Buck Rogers stories for Famous Funnies, which was an odd mix because it was usually talking animals. All of a sudden, you got a science fiction story popping in there. I mean, I would love to see one of those old strip comics to see what's up. He also worked with a guy named Al Cap. You've never heard of Al Cap, have you?
Nope.
I didn't think so. Most of y'all haven't. Al Cap drew a newspaper. You even know what a newspaper? Okay. Newspaper comic strip. Back in the day, you got your newspaper every day. The kids all flipped to the back page, and there was comic strips. Well, he did work with Al Cap on Little Abner, which we almost didn't get it all in Louisville. We got in the Sunday paper, but we didn't get it in the daily. So it was a treat to get to watch, read the Sunday paper and see Al Cap's Little Abner. Then he started doing the covers to novels, to paperbacks. And mostly he did like Conan and fantasy stuff. Then he went to Warren, which I have some of the Warren's work that he did here. Eerie, Blazing Combat, Vampirella, Creepy. I always loved any Warren comic I found. If you get a chance to buy one of these issues and you pass it up, your mistake, because they're to me they're just beautiful. Other work that he did, if you've ever seen Molly Hatchet's album covers, the first one was Death Dealer, the big black knight on the black armored horse. I find that to be incredible. Before you came along, in the office, which was turned into your bedroom, I had a picture of the Golden Warrior on the wall. Hopefully you can find a picture to show them. It's a warrior riding a chariot pulled by polar bears. When you came along, mine decided that wasn't suitable for a nursery, and it came down. I guess I sold it, I don't know. He also did a movie poster for a not so great fantasy movie called Fire and Ice. Mm-hmm. So basically, he did a lot of work. He's one of the most popular fantasy artists out there. He's up there with Julie Bell and all the others. Unfortunately, Frank left us back in 2010, died from a stroke.
A lot of tragedy in your guys.
Yeah, because they're older guys. Some of them aren't around.
All right, so that was your number 3. So I guess that brings me to number 2, which this next one, I've already talked about before in earlier episodes.
And you probably will talk about again.
Probably so. And that is artist Jim Lee. And you guys heard me talk about him in our last episode, our best comic book story arcs, which was Hush. And he's had an amazing career in both DC, Marvel, and in Image Comics, which he was one of the co-founders of. And he did work earlier in the 90s, the X-Men #1, which is still, last I checked, the best-selling comic book issue of all time. And he drew like 4 different variants of. So really popular comic there. And then later he did the Batman Hush story, which I've said is one of the best drawn comic books of all time in my opinion. And he did some really unique designs for the story, like with Catwoman, for example, her costume. I don't think I'd ever seen that costume on her before, so whenever I see her in that outfit, I'm like, that's Jim Lee's Catwoman right there.
Isn't that the one with the big round goggles?
Yes. And in recent years, he has become the head publisher of DC Comics.
He's like CEO or some bigwig, I don't know.
So, great artist and hopefully a great businessman.
He's at least upperly mobile.
Mm-hmm.
Good
and
luck.
He also did the work for Wildcats in Image Comics. So, also he did a lot of work for stories that I didn't care for. He's had a few encounters where he's a great artist and the story looks beautiful, but the story also sucks. He did right after Hush. I heard he was going to be doing a series story for Superman, which I was really excited about. Like, hey, he did, one of my favorite characters. Now he's gonna do my other favorite character. Like, all right, and it was terrible. Superman for Tomorrow, beautifully drawn story, but it's just awful writing. Was kind of bored. I took comfort from looking at the artwork. Also, another example of bad story. I talked about this before. Batman, All-Star Batman and Robin. Frank Miller and Jim Lee hated it. Just sorry, no other way to say it. I just hated it.
Wasn't my Batman.
Yeah, not what you think Batman to be at all. Just terrible. So Jim Lee, stick to great writers. You're much more appreciated when you have a good writer at your side. So my number 2, Jim Lee.
All right, so my number 2. Is Bernie Wrightson.
Okay.
As best I could tell, one of Bernie's first comic work was on House of Mystery, number 179 in 1969 for DC Comics. I don't know that I've seen that, but I would love to. He did the Marvel Tower of Shadows that I mentioned earlier that Wally Wood was involved with. And he also did some work for another Marvel horror book called Chamber of Darkness. Then he got his the big hit that he's most famous for was with Len Wein in 1971, House of Secrets number 92, first Swamp Thing. They pretty much got the big green guy going. Then in 1975, he shared a loft in Manhattan with Barry Windsor-Smith, Jeff Jones, and Mike Kaluta. They called their little group the Studio. If you ever hear anybody talking about comic book artists, they mention the Studio, you were talking about some of the greatest talent to ever be assembled in one place, in my opinion, ever. I would love to have took the guys lunch and just sat back and watched. Because it had to be some amazing stuff going on in that loft. Now, other things Bernie's done, he did Captain Stern for Heavy Metal, the movie and the magazine.
Okay.
He drew illustrations for Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf, and when Stephen King re-released The Stand, the longer version, he did a lot of illustrations for that version. He did illustrations for Frankenstein. Some of the panels in here, which I hope you can show them, some of the panels in here are just absolutely amazing. There's one of a laboratory that's got so much detail in it, you can stare at it for a while. There's another horror shot with some guy holding the axe leaning over a split rail fence with severed heads on the top of it. Don't show the kids. But at any rate, I went to a Diamond Comics convention in Baltimore, and they were having their mixer the night before the show started, and lo and behold, I see Bernie Wrightson sitting at a table all by himself. I look around figuring he's about to get mugged, but I guess people didn't know who he was, whatever. I go over and say, "Hey, Bernie, can I sit down? My name's Irvin Seavers." Of course, I had a name badge on, so he probably could read. And he said, "Sure, have a seat." Well, I bought him a drink, and we talked for a while. And then finally I said, "Bernie, Batman the Cult," which was a 4-issue prestige format comic that he drew. I said, "What the hell?" And he leaned in real close. He says, can you keep a secret?" "Absolutely. Don't tell anybody." But he said, "Irvin, I did that real quick and I made an obscene amount of money." In my opinion, it was not up to his normal standards, but if you're going to get that kind of money, then more power to you. Good for you. Now, in January of 2017, just a few years ago, Bernie announced he was going to retire from comics due to an illness. And then just 2 or 3 months later in March, he passed away from brain cancer.
Yeah.
The last episode of Walking Dead Season 7 is dedicated to Bernie Wrightson.
All right.
Back to you.
All right, so we're down to my number one. So number one probably won't come as a surprise to any comic book fan. My number one pick, Alex Ross, who you guys know is responsible for the Kingdom Come story. And really enough nice things can't be said about Alex Ross. I mean, he has such a unique style to him. I mean, the details that go into his work. I mean, it's just unmatched. I mean, any other comic book artist, I mean, they're all great. But Alex Ross's style, I mean, you just can't compare to it. I mean, the characters look so real.
He's
and
the
so
only guy I
detailed.
know that when he draws a cloth costume or a shirt, it looks like cloth.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's cotton.
I mean, the details of a character's cape alone, I mean, it's just amazing. And if you see some of the panels in Kingdom Come, I mean, it's just beautiful. And he's done other work too. I saw a beautiful panel of Avengers recently that and I'll throw it up here. And you know, the details on that and the costumes, and it's just it cannot be overstated. Alex Ross, I don't know how much time goes into his work.
I understand that he'll actually have friends, relatives come in and he'll have a Superman costume,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll have them put it on and strike the pose he wants for the panel because he wants everything, the cloth, to hang perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he puts the time in.
I mean, I imagine if he uses a model, like the detail that goes into it, you know, you see that guy walking down the street like, hey, you're Superman. Like, what the hell?
I don't know about that. Yeah, he
But-
does good work.
Yeah, number one pick, Alex Ross. Check out Kingdom Come if you haven't already. If you're a comic book fan, I don't know why you haven't. So,
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, that means it's my last pick. Well, I'm going to go with a gentleman named Jim Steranko as my number one artist. Jim's a little bit different in a lot of ways. Most of these guys, they spent their whole lives, you know, artists. You know, started out that way, got their first job wherever, and then retired from, you know, from drawing or whatever type of art they do. Jim did just about everything. In the 50s, he was a musician. He had a band called the Lancers. He got in tight with one of the guitar players for Bill Haley and the Comets. I mean, they became friends. He was a magician, an illusionist, and an escape artist. Jack the King Kirby has stated that he created Mr. Miracle, the escape artist, after seeing Steranko's performance. So, Jim is not a boring character.
mm-hmm.
He started out in comics with Harvey Comics, another company that just did talking animals for the most part, but he got him started into a superhero line. He created a character called Spy-Man, Magic Master, and the Gladiator. But that didn't really work out. Harvey Comics just wasn't a superhero comic book company.
Mm-hmm.
So then he moved on. When he went to Marvel, he got a job working on the Nick Fury split book, which was something Marvel did with a lot of Tales to Astonish, Strange Tales. He got a job on Strange Tales doing the Nick Fury. So first half of the book would be Doctor Strange. Second half would be Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the covers, they alternated. One month it would be the Doctor Strange cover, the next month it would be a Nick Fury cover. Well, he took Nick Fury from a guy wearing a jacket and a tie, basically a suit, to a guy wearing a skin-tight action outfit, and using his definitely different, I guess, psychedelic style, pop art kind of stuff. He's got a couple of panels that people have compared to Salvador Dali's work. I hope you can find the one with the melting clocks. That's
Okay.
incredible. But his style always intrigued me. On Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 4, he just did the cover, but I loved the cover so much that I had to have that. He did 3 issues of Captain America, my guy, Captain America. Unfortunately, I don't have that complete 18-issue run of Nick Fury. Something else I'm going to have to go. You see what you do? You see what you did? You got me doing this stuff. Now I'm spending money, going out and buying stuff that I would have thought I had, but I don't. So now I got to find them. This is all your fault.
I've bought like 4 or 5 keys and minor keys since we started doing the show.
And
so
all I know is, if there was a payroll, I would make a payroll deduction and have you pay for some of this stuff. But at any rate, Stranko also was involved in the Tower of Shadows series. I got to have that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have the Tower of Shadows. And it was with issue number 1 that he got into an argument with Stan and left the company, which would have been terrible, but they kissed and made up, and he went back and did some more cover projects for Marvel. I met Stranko at a convention. He's kind of eccentric. He was wearing a, what do you call it, the scarf and the neck?
Ascot.
He was wearing an ascot. Had like this shiny silver sports coat.
And he wears Stan shades too, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. He's got that silver looking hair. And he looks like something that he's not. He looks like he's full of himself, but he absolutely is not. He is probably one of the most humble creators I've ever met. When the fans would tell him, I really love this, he would humbly thank them for their praise and would tell several people while I was in the room that if not for you fans, I wouldn't even have a job. So please, thank you guys for liking my work. And I'll never forget meeting him. It was one of the highlights of my comic book history.
Okay.
Fandom.
All right.
Work. So that's it. As far as I know, my first and my last guy are still with us.
All right.
I think Stranko's still alive.
Now, we had to narrow things down in order to make a top 5 list. But, there are so many other artists out there.
Hey, I had to cut George Perez off my list.
Yeah. George Perez, Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby. I mean, there's so many great artists. Jack the King Kirby. There's so many great artists out there. So let's put up an honorable mentions list. So yeah, I mean, you can't narrow down. You can't narrow down great artists to just 5 people. But I mean, we try to. But there's so many great artists out there. So what do you guys think? I mean, what are some of your greatest artists of all time? Leave us a comment in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you guys about greatest artists and what are some of their greatest stuff. Best story arcs and contributions. So let us know. So what do you say we go up and play a game of Stump the Old Man?
Why don't... Okay.
All right. Let's go up and see what Thor's up to. All right, comic lovers, it's time for our Stump the Old Man questions. Now you got, 3? You got a perfect score last week. So now it's time to see if you can do it twice in 2 weeks. All right, so you ready?
Yeah.
All right, you ready, our judge Thor here? Yeah, I think he's ready.
Perfectly content. He's eating.
All right, first question. Aside from the 4 founding members, name 4 heroes who have served as members of the Fantastic Four.
All right, well, let's start with Spider-Man because he's been on every team that there ever was in the Marvel Universe. I remember She-Hulk. I remember Luke Cage. He might have been going by Power Man at that point. And it seems like a bunch of Inhumans have been, so I'll say Medusa.
Okay, that is 4, and they are all correct. Other people who have served as members have been Crystal from the Inhumans.
Inhumans, yeah.
Nova, Ant-Man.
I don't remember those last 2.
Black Panther and Storm.
I remember that.
And Franklin and Valeria Richards, the kids.
Yeah, that's almost cheating. They're family members, but okay.
Well, everyone's a family member in the FF. That's the whole point.
I don't see the DNA resemblance to She-Hulk and the rest of the group.
Okay. All right, so that's 1. right, second question. Who was the first to play a live-action version of Thor in the 1988 TV movie The Incredible Hulk Returns?
Oh gosh, I don't remember actors' names. I mean, I remember the guy. At the time he had hair, but in the later part of his career he went bald. He was in a couple of sitcoms. He was like the neighbor guy in something. I don't remember his name.
His name was Eric Allen Kramer.
I still don't remember his name.
He also starred in the Disney Channel show Good Luck Charlie. And you may also remember him as Little John in Mel Brooks' Robin Hood Men in Tights.
I still wouldn't have known his name even if I remember that.
Okay. Well, there's our Thor question for the week. So,
It's all your fault.
all right, so 1 for 2. No perfect score this week. All right, next up. Coincidentally, I have another Fantastic Four question here. What witch served as nanny to Franklin Richards, the son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman?
You're going to give her credit for the Fantastic Four. You're not going to talk about how she was the Scarlet Witch's mentor. Okay, well, I'm going to get the point. Agatha Harkness.
That is correct. Agatha Harkness was first introduced as Franklin Richards' governess. She easily fended off the Frightful Four when they came to abduct Franklin and admitted to the Fantastic Four that she was a witch. So 2 for 3. So you win.
I'll take it.
You win again this week. All right. So Thor, you good?
Of course he's good. I have snacks in my hand.
All right, comic lovers, that about does it for this episode. But before we go, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do next week. So, as a comic book lover, I've seen like the origin stories of most of the major comic book characters and, their creators. I've heard stories of, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. I've heard stories of Stan and Kirby, Jerry and Joe, that weirdo who created Wonder Woman. But I've hardly heard any stories about Bob Kane, the creator of Batman.
I have to be honest. If we're going to talk about Bob, I'm going to have to start doing some research.
Yeah, but we're gonna dive into it. We're gonna do our research, and we're gonna give you a comprehensive, mini documentary next week on Bob Kane, Bill Finger, and the creation of Batman.
I don't know about you. I look forward to that.
Yep.
What about you all?
All right, guys. See you next week. Excelsior.
Stay safe, true believers. What are you going to say? You got anything to say? Oh.